Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pandesal Forum here at 83-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe. Here we have with us today, we are very privileged to have with us today a very interesting leader, a peace and a peace advocate and socio-economic advocate of Southeast Asia from Vietnam. We have our guest today, Honorable Mr. Tran Dac Loi. Mr. Tran is standing Vice President of the Council for Vietnam Peace and Development Foundation, based in Hanoi. He was also involved in other NGOs before. Other NGOs regarding friendship, Vietnamese peace and development efforts, and also he has been active before in external relations between Vietnam and other countries. Let us welcome Mr. Tran Dac Loi for his opening statement. Anything he would like to talk about your country, about Vietnam and Philippines, Vietnam and your socio-economic success story. Also, some of your friends in the Philippines suggested to me to later on ask you about your views about security in Asia, peace, international solidarity among non-aligned movement of countries in the global south. Mr. Tran Dac Loi, let us welcome him for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Wilson. Yeah. And good morning, everybody. I'm very thankful for an opportunity to be here today and to share with you the information about my country, Vietnam. You may know that Vietnam in the 20th century had to undergo very critical and difficult struggle for the national independence. We, in those days, tried to liberate ourselves from being French colony. After that, we had to defend the national independence against the French aggression supported by the USA. And after the victory over the French aggression, we had to face US intervention and aggression for another 20 years. Vietnam was liberated only in 1975, but after that, Vietnam also has to go through two very difficult decades because of the embargo, because of the Khmer Rouge genocide in Cambodia, and because of the conflict with China in the north. Vietnam actually had normal, relatively normal situation like other countries to develop itself in the middle of the 1990s. Because US embargo against Vietnam was lifted only in 1994, and US normalized the relationship with Vietnam in 1995, 20 years after the war. And the same year, 1995, Vietnam joined ASEAN. And during this period, since 1995, Vietnam has been focusing on social development of the country. And frankly speaking, we were quite successful in this period. Vietnamese economy have been gradually developed with relatively high rate, around 7% per year. And this year, despite the COVID and turbulence in the world market, the GDP growth of Vietnam during the past 9 months is 8.83%, and we are expecting that this year the GDP growth of Vietnam will be around 7.5%. The important thing is that Vietnam, the country which was heavily destroyed because of the war of aggression by the French and the U.S. You may know that the aggression of U.S. alone, have killed 3 million Vietnamese people, injured 4 million people, and a spray of Agent Orange containing dioxin affecting 4,800,000 people. It means that the country is heavily destroyed, and there was a very heavy legacy after the war. And Vietnam has been one of the poorest countries of the world. But the development of economy in the past 30 years has helped us to bring Vietnam from the least developed, underdeveloped country into the medium income country at around 2010. And what important is that along with the economic development, we have succeeded to gradually improve the living conditions of the people to better the life for the ordinary and working people in the country. Poverty in Vietnam in the middle of 80s was about 75% population living under poverty line. But in 1993, it has been reduced to 58%. 2004, it has been reduced to 28%. And now the rate of poverty in the country is less than 4%. It means that every year we have been succeeding to reduce the poverty rate in the country per 1.5 to 2%. And that thanks to the Vietnam policy is that we need to advance social progress and social equality on every step of economic development. If there is economic growth, that should benefit people, working people, and their lives should be improved. And that is a main motto and policies that accompanying our process of economic development. The education has been expanded and has been improving for all of this year. We devoted about 20% of the annual national budget to education in order to support the system of public education and throughout the country, and helping people to get education. And the literacy rate in Vietnam now is more than 95%. And on healthcare, we try to also to develop the system of healthcare consists mainly by the state-owned and public hospitals system of the hospital throughout the country, and helping the people to improve their physical, health situation. And malnutrition has been reduced gradually, and the average life expectancy of Vietnamese has been increased from 62 years in 1990 to 73.6 years in 2020. So it means that we have increase of 13.6 years of life expectancy during the past 30 years. Though Vietnam is economically still in the low medium income group of the countries, but the Human Development Index of Vietnam is relatively high. We are ranking among the higher group of human index development. And generally, I can say that the life of Vietnamese people today is much better than in the past, and majority of population do believe that their life in forthcoming years will surely be better than today. So that explains the optimism of Vietnamese people and the support they are given to the process of social economic development along with the socialist construction in Vietnam. These are brief about the situation in Vietnam, and I will be delighted to answer to any of questions that you may raise concerning our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tran Dac Loi, for your very inspiring overview about the economic miracle of your country, Vietnam. We have heard and read a lot about the things you have achieved in the last decades, in recent decades. And I missed that one part because I was reading some messages. We have people watching via Zoom and some by many via Zoom and via Facebook. You mentioned poverty rate of Vietnam in the mid-1980s was how many percent?
75%.
75%, and now it's only 4%. I think of all the many achievements you have achieved as a country, to me that is one of the most impressive. So your country is, somebody asking here, is your country a mix of socialist and market-driven policies? Is it like almost like China, like you have a socialist government and society, but there are aspects of the economy where you can do business, foreign investors can set up factories. Is it similar to that system? Market-driven socialist economy, is it similar to?
Yes, under the Doi Moi policy in Vietnam, which began in 1986, Vietnam is applying the market economy with socialist orientation in order to develop the country along with the socialist line and objectives. And we actually think that we do not have yet socialism. We have started and are beginning to build it in the country. And in transition period means that along with the socialist factor being created and consolidated, there are non-socialist factors, including capitalist factor, coexist. And the meaning of the transition to socialism means that we gradually develop the socialist factor and consolidate, strengthen them more and more in the society, and at some state it will be prevailing and irreversible. So that's why we try to use the mechanism of market economy with socialist orientation. What are the main difference between the market economy with socialist orientation with other so-called free market economy, which are popular in in the West. First of all, I think that our objective of development is integrated, comprehensive objective. It's not only running after profit, not only running after economic growth, but it has to be accompanied by the social development, social progress, in an ecological development, environmental protection. And we applied the policies that on every step of economic development, the life of people, particularly the poor and the living people, has to be improved adequately. Secondly, it is a combination between the functioning of the market with the state regulation. State cannot leave the market open, for the greedy, profit-seeking, activities without taking into consideration the interests of the whole society and the laboring workers. And they should have the responsibility of regulating market in order to minimize the negative impact of the market and to improve the people, to improve economy for the interest of the whole society. And socialist-oriented market economy also means that combination of the market functioning with the macro plan, macro planning, so every year they will set up development objective, consist of economic indicator, social development indicator, environmental development indicator were introduced and to be achieved, and in order to achieve those objectives, apart from resources from the market, which normally only goes to the place and area which bring high profit, the state investment, public investment, and national program are put in supplementary to the market in order to meet the demands of the people in various locations and to achieve the balanced development in the country. And last but not least, in the socialist state, socialist-oriented economy is a multi-sectoral economy where the state-owned enterprises and economic sector do play a significant role. We call that playing a key role in order to help the process of development in the country more healthy and for achieving the integrated objective of development. And this is a main feature of the so-called socialist-oriented market economy in Vietnam. And I think that this kind of mechanism is one of the key factors helping us to achieve those positive results of development, both economically, socially, and environmentally, ecologically in the past 30 years.
Thank you very much for your very enlightening explanation of the economic phenomenon of Vietnam. Very inspiring also what you said, Mr. Tran. You said earlier that despite the global uncertainties in the economy of the world, despite the COVID still lingering in some parts of the world, your economy is growing at 8.83% in the first 8 months and projected in the last 9 months, and then expected to end the year with a total GDP growth of 7.5%. That's very inspiring and amazing. How many other countries in the world are socialist? I think China is socialist, Cuba is socialist, not so many, no? But there are many in Latin America, I think. What is your...
Yeah, we have Vietnam, China, Cuba, North Korea, and also Laos is also developing towards the socialist direction.
Laos also,
Yeah, yeah.
yes. Is Laos also doing it the market-driven socialist economy? Is it similar?
I think so. Laos also applying the market mechanism with the state regulation and state economic program in order to develop the country in economic and social aspects. Yeah.
There was a Philippine ambassador before in Beijing, the late Chito Santa Romana. He mentioned to me that Vietnam and China land border had been settled after like how many decades of negotiation bilateral. Is it true? The ambassador Chito Santa Romana said, I don't know how about 20, 30 years negotiation, and then you have settled your land border dispute, Vietnam and China, I heard from Chito Santa Romana.
Yes, Vietnam is a close neighbor to China, and we have a very long land border which lasts more than 1,300 kilometers. You know, long.
How many?
1,300 kilometers, more than that, and this border never been clearly identified and fixed, not only for decades but for 1,000 years, since the past, but Vietnam and China has intensive negotiation in the late of the 20th century, and in 1999 we have an agreement of settling the land border issues with China. And since then, we have a stable border, which is a peaceful which help for development of economic cooperation and people exchange between Vietnam and China. I think that has been a very significant positive development in our bilateral relationship with China.
So in the sea disputes in the South China Sea among ASEAN countries, China, Vietnam, and Philippines, so do you also foresee negotiations and dialogue as a good way to eventually reach a good future for all Asians?
Yes, South China Sea nowadays becoming a hotspot, and situations there is becoming more and more dangerous. And if this issue could not be handled well, it may be, one of the factors that create conflict and destabilize the situation in the region. And South China Sea is not only an issue of the dispute between the coastal countries on their sovereignty on the sea, but also very important, the maritime routes for the world. And that's why the peace and stability in South China Sea is the issue of the concern, not only by the country in the region, but is also the issue of the concern and interest of the world community. And that's why we think that it is very important to settle this issue in a proper way. And of course, there are disputes, in many places and between many countries in the world, but dispute not necessarily should bring to military conflict or war. So the issue is that how we handle it, and I think that it has to be this dispute has to be solved only through peaceful means. There are two major peaceful means. One is diplomatic, through the diplomatic channel, through negotiation between the countries concerned. In order to enable this process of negotiation, the country concerned should regulate their claim to be, should to be relevant to the historic and legal, grounds, to be a rational one. Only in that case, the countries can start negotiation based on that ground. If there is lack of the willingness of modifying the claims and the claim of any party come as absurd demands, so then not be possible the negotiation and settlement through diplomatic channels. But in any case, we think that if that can be done, so the first and priority form of settlement of the dispute is a diplomatic negotiation between the concerned country. The second, also peaceful means of settlement is through international arbitration. Many countries in the world who have problem with the dispute on the sea have succeeded to solve this problem through arbitration, and these are countries who are very much friendly to each other. So we can see that a case of Malaysia and Singapore, the case of India and Bangladesh, the case of Australia and East Timor, etc. So this arbitration is respect to the international law and is also effective form of settlement in a peaceful way. And I think that we should not ignore that and should respect also that way. And I think those are two peaceful ways of the settlement of the dispute in South China Sea in order to deal with this complicated issue. At the same time, since South China Sea is the peace, stability, freedom of navigation and aviation in South China Sea is the issue of the interest and concern of the all international community, we need to work out together the rules or the code of conduct in South China Sea in order to prevent the occurring of any conflict, or war there. That's why the working out of the effective code of conduct is important, and involvement of the international community on creating a mechanism for conflict prevention in South China Sea, I think is the essential thing that we need to work together about that.
Thank you very much. We have a question here from Ms. Tina. How does Vietnamese government ensure that essential services and goods vital to the people, the welfare of the people, like energy, water, land, housing, telecommunications, banking? Do you allow everything to be privatized or not? how do you ensure regulation and control of corporations in a socialist society like Vietnam, even though market-oriented? She's asking about like energy, water, the important public utilities, public transport, telecommunications. Are these privatized or not? Do you allow them to be private or not? And how do you regulate control of corporations in a free market socialist economy? Also including health and education, do you allow totally private or not? From Ms. Tina Ebro.
Yeah, yes, as I was telling that Vietnam is in the transition period towards socialism. We have not yet socialism. We have a mixture now, economy, and socialist factors and non-socialist factors are coexist in this period. And in this period, our economy is a multi-sectoral one. So the government is encouraging people to make business on their own in order to improve their own life and contribute to the country development. But at the same time, along with these market forces, it is a state economic sector is playing a key role, important role. For example, in the areas that are important for the macro economy, the economic security and affecting the interests of a large part of population, there is a state-owned companies are playing a dominating role, like banking system. The state bank are having a decisive role in the finance and monetary, market. In energy, energy area, state have absolute, dominations there. In communication, in the area of the public transportation, or land and natural resources is also belong to state and used by the state for serving the interest of the whole society. So state also play a key role in education and healthcare. So the public school, public hospital are dominating and implementing the state policy in order to educate and to take care of the health situation of the population. And by doing so, we can gradually develop the social security system, covering more and more gradually the social protection for the people, particularly for the poor, the workers and peasants. And why there is not monopoly of the state? There is not a monopoly because the resources of the state are also limited, and we want to encourage, people's participation in development of the social welfare. Besides the state, besides the state program, but it doesn't mean that state is giving up, this responsibility in those areas. Vice versa, the state maintaining it very strong, engagement in providing those social benefits to the people. Like I told that for decades, the state, the government devoted permanently 20% of national budget for education. So that is not decreasing at all. And that play an important factor for expansion of the education in Vietnam.
Thank you very much for your explanation. Before we go to you, there's a question here about geopolitics in the region. You earlier said that South China Sea is a possible source of uncertainty. Another question some journalists asking via Zoom is the Taiwan issue. How do you analyze the Taiwan conflict issue? A few days ago here, Professor Bobby Tuason of the University of the Philippines and Senteg think tank, he said that East Germany, West Germany took decades to reunify. Vietnam also took several decades to eventually reunify your country. But still there are several countries not yet reunified. China and Taiwan still not reunified. North Korea and South Korea still not reunified. What is your view of the Taiwan conflict? And there seems to be in the recent, like 1 or 2 years, some bolder political moves from some Western politicians to get involved in the Taiwan issue. What is your view of this Taiwan conflict issue and also its impact on Asia stability? And since your country somehow had reunified successfully after the 70s, what is your proposal? How do you see that to solve the Taiwan dispute or crisis area?
In the case of Vietnam, the country was divided not by itself, but because the intervention and aggression by the imperialist forces. That's why the struggle for unification of the country was based and closely attached with the anti-imperialist aggression liberation war. And that is a interest of the nation, of the whole country. And once the foreign aggressor is out, then people throughout the country jointly united without any kind of obstacles. So that is a specific or the situation in Vietnam, in the 20th century. The case of Taiwan and Korea is a result of historical development, in the 20th century in those countries, and the desire to be reunited, I think is a just desire of the people in those countries. Situation now is different than the situation in the 20th century. The case of Taiwan, China and I think the absolute majority of the countries in the world do accept and respect one China policy. So they all understand that Taiwan is a part of China. These are not two countries or two nations, no, because they have a historic legacy to overcome and political obstacle to settle. And doing so, we do think that it should be done by Chinese themselves, between Beijing and Taipei, and no one should impose or interfere on this issue, because that should fully respect the will of the Chinese people and on the both straits. Uh, but I am, among those who want this process to go in a peaceful way. That is the best way for the interest of people in mainland China and also in Taiwan. And also that is the best for the interest of the region and the world. Imagine if there is a war or military conflict between China and Taiwan. I think that not only Chinese people from mainland or in Taiwan will be affected, but the whole world and the region will be heavily affected. So that should not be the choice. So therefore, we for the kind of the peaceful negotiation and discussion between the two sides in order to have a peaceful reunification, and that should be a kind of the understanding and willingness from both sides to do so. But we do not support any kind of attempt to create a tension or endangers, any of the part there here in order to create a military conflict, which is benefit no one. In the case of the Korea, it's also a historic legacy, and I think that this issue should be settled by Korean people also, from the north and from the south, without any kind of the imposition or interference from outside. Korean, they know best how to go about that. And the threat of military attack and operation, I think, are not useful at all for the situation in the Korean Peninsula. And what is going on now is that we see that increasing militarization in both sides of the Korea, and that is not helpful for settlement of the issue. And there should be a kind of confidence building. I think that among the two sides, and in order to find the optimum way how to overcome this legacy of the past and to build the joint future for people of both Korea, North and South. So that is a thing that I would like to share my viewpoint on it.
Very, very enlightening and very good analysis for the two Asian countries still divided. Thank you very much. From a country that has successfully integrated North and South and became good, successful. There's a question. Can we pass on the mic to? You are free to ask questions, just message or raise your hand.
Good morning, Tran. Good morning, Willie. Attorney Virgie Laxa Suarez. Tran, my question is, here in the Philippines, the past administration has been known for its policy on drugs. I mean, the war against drugs of the past administration. So I'm interested to know what is, if any, is the drug policy of the government in Vietnam? That's the first question. Second, because of the economic, poverty always result to increase in the crime rate. Now, considering that the economic development in Vietnam, what is now the crime rate? The third question is, how does the government see if there's any policy about domestic violence and policy on LGBT? Okay, thank
Very
you.
Interesting.
So 4 questions.
Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you for question. I think similar to I think that in many countries of the world, Vietnamese law is prohibit the drug trafficking and trade, and as well as illegal production in Vietnam. And we do think that this drug is the drug production, trafficking, and trading is a kind of crime that we need to those who are doing these things should be punished. But the process of fighting these crimes has to be done according to the law, and there is a law in Vietnam about that, and we have been doing so. At the same time, we consider that those people who are using drugs are not criminal. They are victims. They're facing a kind of the special sickness that the society and government should take care. So we are not criminalizing them, you know, but rather focus on those who make a profit out of expanding the drug, you know, consumption in the society. The rate of the crime, there is crime, various kind of crime in Vietnam, and there are also transnational crimes, which and also occurs in Vietnam, along with the process of countries in international integration, you know. But I must say that the rate of crime in Vietnam is relatively low to compare with, you know, other countries in the region and in the world. But nevertheless, it is a concern of the issue of concern of society, and we are trying our best to do with that in minimizing the crime in Vietnam. Concerning LGBT in Vietnam, the law and the government is respecting people's choice for their sexual orientation, and the government does not interfere in it. So there is no banning, no punishment, but rather, you know, respect, and people of LGBT or people, they can, you know, openly, you know, exercise their sexual orientation in the society, of course. But that is the official policy, and I think that concerning the mentality in society, then majority people are also tolerate with that. But there are maybe small section of the old, you know, people maybe they do not like it. They do not like it, but it does not affect the situation of LGBT in the society, because the official policy of government is respect their right to choose of their sexual orientation.
Thank you. That's a question here. Yes. Microphone. Yes.
Good morning, Mr. Tran Dac Loi and Mr. Wilson Lee Flores. My name is Gina De La Cruz. I would like to ask our speaker, what is the government's policy on foreign investors' profit? Or is there a government policy or an exact profit ceiling, a regulation for profit ceiling of foreign investors?
Thank you. And also maybe I could add to her question, Why is Vietnam so successful in attracting foreign direct investments compared to countries like the Philippines? I think you have like 5 times, 4 times, 10 times our foreign investors to Vietnam than to other countries. Why are you successful in attracting many, many foreign investors? Additional question.
You may know that Vietnam, was isolated, economy in the past, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and our departing point is very low level of productive forces. Agriculture mainly manual, buffalo in front and behind. So, in order to develop the country, Vietnam needs resources, needs investment, needs technology, which is not available in Vietnam. That's why we need to attract foreign investment to support the country's development. That's why in Vietnam, I think that is one of the most open economy today in the world. A lot of laws and administrative reform was created in order to facilitate and encourage foreign direct investment into the country, and why Vietnam could attract, the significant foreign investment into Vietnam nowadays. I think that first of all, because of the reform policy in Vietnam, which create a friendly business environment, not only for the local business sector, but also for the foreign investors. Secondly, Vietnam has succeeded to sign numerous of the trade agreement with the all major, economy of the world. So we have with European Union, with Britain, with US, with Japan, with Korea, with China, India, ASEAN. Those trade treaties allow the investor in Vietnam to have access to the very large market of the world, and that is one thing attractive for the foreign investment in Vietnam. And thirdly, in recent years, because of the U.S.-China strategic competition, many foreign investors who have been invested in China try to move, their investment outside China. So Vietnam is considered as one of the among the most attractive place for this kind of the shipment in investment by the foreign investors. And last but not least, the investor in Vietnam, I think that when they are investing in Vietnam, they feel very much comfortable because political stability, social stability, the stability of macroeconomy. For example, Vietnamese dong is not devaluated vis-a-vis US dollar at all. Inflation in Vietnam is very low. It's from beginning of this year up to now is 2 point somewhat percent only. So Vietnam has good budget policy, which is making economy stable. For example, the government and public debt today is only 43% of the GDP, which is much lower than 60% as a norm, to be achieved. So that's why most of the foreign investors in Vietnam, they benefited from this condition, and they want to expand their activities in Vietnam. Vietnam do not have a measure of limiting profit from the business, including the local and foreign investment. The profit will be depends on the effectiveness of their functioning. But we do have a law regulating, the activities of foreign investors, and taxation, applied to both the local and foreign investors, and we do not differentiate, between them. I must add that during the past more than 30 years, Vietnam was on the stage of attracting foreign investment quantitatively, now move to the qualitative state. So we are now trying to screen the foreign investment in order to attract those who have based on the high productivity, environmentally friendly, the technological progress, to give the preference to those than run after the foreign investment blindly, So these are the main direction of attraction of foreign investment now in Vietnam.
Thank you very much for that very interesting explanation. So you are very open to foreign investments, yet you have a strong political will from your government to regulate all businesses, and you encourage now better quality, not purely quantity investments. Very interesting. Related to your question, we have a question via Zoom also from Mr. Joseph Puruganan from the Focus on Global South. Mr. Joseph Puruganan asks, Mr. Tran, Vietnam joined the World Trade Organization in 2007. Vietnam is now part of CPTPP and also the world's largest free trade zone called RCEP. What is the perspective of your Vietnamese government in joining these trade and investment agreements, which seem to largely favor the interests of corporations? Would you say that these are neoliberal policies? How do they work for a socialist country like Vietnam? How can Vietnam flourish as a socialist country with these seemingly neoliberal policies? Thank you, Loi, from Mr. Joseph Puruganan from Focus on the Global South. So you are part of CPTPP and also RCEP.
Yes, I first of all would like to say hello to Joseph. We are friends for many years, but we haven't seen each other for a long time. So hi,
please
Joseph.
come here for lunch.
And concerning the questions raised by Joseph, I do agree that neoliberal or economic policy and development has been dominating the world, since the past decades and expanded along with the globalization, and many of the trade treaties and network were created based on this direction and containing a lot of neoliberal elements, including CPTPP, the WTO, etc. You know, the issue is that we are living. This is the world we are living in, and this is the international order that does exist in the world and dominating the world now. So we don't have alternative really to choose. There is no more Comecon, no more socialist camp. And if we look at the financial resources, technological resources, or the market, you can see that all of these are in this framework. So you have no choice but to try to adapt to it and try to overcome the challenges that posed by newer policies and to achieve your objective of development. I think this is not only concerning Vietnam, but China also the same, you know. So we are engaged in multiple free trade agreement, etc., in order also to diversify the economic relation, diversify the market, diversify the supply chain, and this diversification is important for not making our economy depending on any single market. So, for example, this year, when China has been locking down, so our access to Chinese market has some, difficulties and problem, and trade with China as well. But thanks to access to other kind of market, we can really, not only maintain but increase our export in order to support the economic development in the country. So this is a multilateralization of economic cooperative relation is one of important strategy of Vietnam. We do aware of the nature of this system and the challenges that we have to face, but we need to find a way in order to overcome those limitations and challenges and to develop our own economy. Thank you.
Thank you. So in a way, what you're saying is, even though these international agreements are neoliberal because the world is dominated by this, you have to join, Vietnam has to join and compete. Is it? So you are similar to China, that instead of shying away, just join and strengthen your economy and compete. So Philippines should do that also. We should also learn to compete and gain from it. Yes. There's a question here from one of our top writers and intellectuals in the Philippines. I will read the question. She is in Zoom. One of our most prominent intellectuals and leaders in the Philippines, Miss Gemma Cruz Araneta, a very respected intellectual. As she said, I visited your country in May 1968. Do the post-war generation, she was also former tourism minister of the Philippines. And do the post-war generations of young Vietnamese people know about the U.S. war of intervention in Vietnam, that your country was almost divided into two parts, from Ms. Gemma Cruz Araneta, a very prominent, respected intellectual and former cabinet minister of the government. Also, former international beauty queen. Yes, very famous in the Philippines.
I see.
Yes, and also very good writer. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam, for the question. You know, in Vietnam, the people of my generation and older, we experienced the war in our own life, and of course that will maybe never forgotten. You know, after the war, and for me, all my childhood was under the war, under the U.S. bombing, and many years later, when I heard the sound of airplane, my immediate reaction was to find somewhere to hide myself. That continues many years after. And young people, young generation in Vietnam today, they are much more lucky. They don't have to undergo of those, you know, challenges. You know, don't have to pass through those horrible experiences, and for them to enjoy peace, to enjoy free movement, etc., is some kind of the granted thing, you know, and of course they are not. It is impossible to demand that they should have a full experience like us, but at the same time we do care about telling to young people about our history, to help them to learn the history in order to build the future. And there are museums in Vietnam, there are school curriculum, there are, you know, different kind of celebration of the historical events in Vietnam, and also media try to remind about the lessons of the past in order for the people to build their future. And I must say that of course the understanding of young generation today is very different from our generation, but the majority of them know the key, you know, lesson from the history, and they do treasure that. If you come to Hanoi even today, or I am very you know, impressed that you visited Vietnam in 1968 when the war is still on the high time, you know. But if you come today, you can see that, for example, Mausoleum of Ho Chi Minh, thousands of young people every day, they queuing there and to visit Ho Chi Minh, etc. We think that this patriotic, you know, feeling will remain with today's young generation of Vietnam.
Thank you very much. Somebody also texted that, thank you for that question, Ms. Gemma Cruz Araneta. She was also the first Filipino and first Asian to win Miss International in 1964. Yes, and also a grandniece of the national hero, Dr. Jose Rizal. Thank you. There's a question related from Ms. Tina Ebro. I will read her question. She has a very interesting question here. From Ms. Tina Ebro, she said, Ukraine isn't the only place in the world now where a possible nuclear conflagration could erupt in the near future. Taiwan, where the U.S. and Chinese military forces are engaging in ever more provocative military maneuvers, there is also increasing risk that such move by both superpowers from both sides could lead to accident or nuclear escalation. What can peace movements in the global south do? Especially ASEAN region has declared ourselves as a nuclear-free zone. What can ASEAN countries do to help prevent conflict in Taiwan and promote peace? From Ms. Tina Ebro.
Yeah, I think you are correct that this growing tension in Taiwan Strait is endangering, peace and stability in the region. And I told before, if there is a military conflict or war, that will benefit no one, but only the losses for everyone. That's why I think that ASEAN also, as well as the international peace movement, should voice up in order to prevent this escalation. I think that what is going now is all sides, related sides, trying to show Moscow, to each other, and that will only accelerate the tension. I think that the tense, measures has to be taken. The demilitarization has to be, promoted, and process of the peaceful negotiation between the concerned party has to be established, and that should be a kind of demands from the international peace movement to all parties concerned. They have to really to look back of what is happening now, and to see the dangers of what might happen. I think lesson in the Ukraine is to give us very obvious example of this absurdity of power showing or politics can lead to such a dramatic result.
Thank you. So you are for demilitarization of the region, more peace. Related to that question of Ms. Tina Ebro, somebody said that former congressman of the Philippines, Nery Colmenares, said that he once went to Vietnam and saw a museum of the Vietnam War. And in the museum, there was an exhibit saying that some of the American bombers that were bombing Indochina and Vietnam came from Clark Air Base in the Philippines. So, what is your view about foreign military presence in Southeast Asia? Somebody asked here.
Yes, that is true that during Vietnam War, U.S. used its military bases in the Philippines, which is a Subic and Clark, in order to support their aggression in Vietnam. Apart from that, they also recruit, contingent of Filipino soldiers, to participate as an ally in the South Vietnam. But that not only Philippines, U.S. has done that, with South Korea, also use a military base in Japan, in Korea, in Taiwan, and in Thailand, to do so. And it was a theater created by the U.S. in order to suppress the revolution in Indochina. Of course, for us, when we fought against U.S. aggression, we have to face all those challenges. And we know that there were peace movement in the Philippines. The progressive people in the Philippines those days also stood up to protest against the U.S. usage of their military bases in the Philippines in order to make crime in Vietnam. And I forgot the question.
Yes, the question is, what is your view about foreign military presence in ASEAN? Is it and do you earlier said that the China-Taiwan issue and the Korean North and South Koreans are issues best settled by the Chinese people and the Korean peoples alone. What are your views about the foreign military presence in this region?
You know, if you look back at the history in the 20th century up to now, we can see that foreign military bases never, serve the purpose of peace building, but only for the expansion of aggression and conflict in many parts of the world. So I think that this situation is also applying for today. And now U.S. is maintaining and its foreign military bases. I know, as I know, about 700 foreign military bases around the world, and you know that no one except the terrorists, but no country dare to attack U.S. to engage the war against U.S. There has been no such a thing already for centuries, and for sure this military basis is not for defending U.S. At all. But what has been happening up to now is that they serve as a military, means to expand U.S. intervention and aggression in various parts of the world. I am for the abolishment of all military bases in the world, and I think that will be helpful for peace building in the world.
Thank you very much. The journalists here in Pandesal Forum are very happy with what you said, because we want peace and more trade in this uncertain world now. We should learn to be like Vietnam, focusing on the economy and social justice. Once again, what you said, I could not forget, from 70+% poverty, 75% poverty rate in 1980s, now to 4%. I think your country deserves a gold medal for Olympics for doing that. That's most remarkable achievement of your country. What can Philippines learn from Vietnam? Yesterday, Senator Amy Marcos was here. She was saying she admires your country for your determination to improve the economy. She said your officials told Senator Amy Marcos, you are doing very well in rice production and rice exports. And your officials told Senator Amy Marcos their goal is next time to export rice to Thailand. And also, she also said, before Vietnam, you don't drink coffee. You only drink tea like the Koreans, Japanese, and Chinese. Then suddenly, you're now number 2 exporter of coffee in the world. Can you give tips to the Philippines, because you have many friends in the Philippines? What can the new government of Bongbong Marcos do? What can you suggest? What can we learn from Vietnam? to be better economy?
No, I don't think that I have to, in a position to give advice. I'm sure that the Filipinos leader and politicians and people, are capable enough to find the best way for the development of their country, because they are the best people to understand the situation, the capacity, and the expectation of the Filipinos, and not advice from outside. But what I would like to say is that we in the 70s and 80s not only was a poor country, but a very backward country. And Vietnam those days is a poorly agricultural economy, But despite that, agriculture is a tradition and prevailing in the country, we do have problem of the food shortage. No, those days, in the 70s, in the 80s. So every year, the government had to import about 1 million ton of food, but to feed people, on the minimum in the 1970s and 1980s. But with the Doi Moi process that we have launched more than 30 years ago, Vietnam, soon became self-sufficient in food and become a major exporter of the number of agricultural products. So we are second in the world to export rice, coffee, we are leading in various agricultural production. So this is very important, for achieving food sovereignty. It's, we think that to build the productive capacity for the country to meet the basic needs of the people, one of the key policy that Vietnam has been, pursuing all these years.
Amazing. Food sovereignty. That's something we in the Philippines should learn from you. Another thing, somebody texted here, one question. Your success in Vietnam has shown to the world that socialism is not a bad word, because in some Western circles and even in our very westernized Philippine society, socialism has become like a bad word sometimes. We even have a very controversial term called red tagging. Anybody in the society, left-leaning or socialist, are all branded in a negative way. So in your country, you have shown that socialism is a good, viable way for a country to raise economically your standards and your life. And also in Latin America, there's a socialist wave now. Many elections, people are winning. Brazilians, they just had a candidate that is ahead in the presidential election in Chile, in Peru, Mexico. What is your view of socialism as a way of life and governance? Because in the West, they say that Vietnam, China, Cuba, they are anti-democratic, they are bad governments. Or what can you say about socialism as an option to the world?
Vietnamese revolution had two objectives. One is the national independence, and second is the socialism. So national independence has to be achieved in order to build socialism. And when we chosen to go through socialist path, our objective is to better and people life, and to achieve the happiness for the people in society. We have been following this direction through the years, and what has been happening and achieved in Vietnam shows that the socialist direction of development is not only feasible, but it is very much viable, and for sure when it can meet can make the life of people much better to compare with capitalist development on the same footing or on the same level of economic development. All indication from poverty rate, from equality, from the
Life expectancy.
yeah, life expectancy, education, healthcare, the malnutrition, and housing, and position of the women, position of the workers or peasants in society. I think in all those aspects, if you take any country in the world with the same level of economic of Vietnam, you would say that all this education in Vietnam is much better, than the other country with the same economic, indicators. Now today's the world is in flux in a very deep multiple crisis. We have a financial economic crisis, which is now affecting everywhere, and there is prediction that recession will come soon. Inflation, is going on. We also are witnessing very deep social crisis, social and human crisis in the world. So in the most developed capitalist country, the living condition of people during the past 15 years did not improve at all. Vice versa, the working people today feel they are more precarious than before, and most of people do not have wealth, and they are in a big debt, depending on financial capital, and the disparity, is widening across the capitalist world. Another crisis we are observing is the environmental ecological crisis, which caused by the profit-seeking activities and overconsumption, which is the logic of the capitalism. And we are facing today already a deadlock of inability of the earth to sustain, human life in this way, in the way of consumption, in the way of exploration that capitalism is applying to the world. So, in fact, we are facing crisis of the mode of development, the crisis of capitalist mode of development, and therefore the need to seek for alternative form of development, which is a kind of the rational way of using natural resources, to care more about working people, to improve really, the living condition for workers and peasants, without, the greed-dominated or motivated, blind competition, which is characteristic of the capitalist development. And this demand for the socialist alternative, I think today is more and more urgent. in this time of the crisis of the mode of development, capitalist development today.
Thank you very much for that very, very enlightening analysis. You know, in the future, we should have just one entire session on that topic alone with you explaining that. Very interesting. Because in the Philippines, we have been bombarded with only the Western capitalist view of the world, and now we have a neighbor, Vietnam, that is outperforming many of the traditional capitalist countries with good social justice and equal progress for all. Thank you very much. In fact, your country is an inspiration to the Philippines. We should learn. Last question, because they said we have lunch here prepared for our guests here. Simple lunch. Tomorrow is World Bread Day in the world, in the United Nations. And I know Vietnam is #2 rice exporter in the world, but you are also well known for your bread. You have banh mi. We also have banh mi from Vietnam.
I would like to thank you very much for an opportunity to be here and sharing with you today about my country, about Vietnam. And I would like to thank also all those who came here and also who are following our talk here through Zoom. And it showed your interest about Vietnam. And I hope that today's session will help you a little bit understanding more about our country, and most importantly about our struggle, our desire, our objective for developing the country towards socialism. Vietnam and Philippines has many similarities. We both were colonized by the Western forces, and the desire for independence of the nation is common. We all share many of the values, in our struggle. And Vietnam and Philippines both are members of ASEAN country. We are the country who lay on the east and the west side of the South China Sea and facing the same typhoon every year, So
yes, we export our typhoon to you.
But we say that you help us by weakening the typhoon before entering Vietnam. So we are thankful to you because of that. And I am sure that Vietnamese people and Filipino people have also very similar desire to live in peace and to enjoy the life with dignity, to achieve the social and economic development with social progress, etc. And in this, in achieving this, I think that it is very important that we strengthen our solidarity and cooperation in order to advance the struggle for this common objective. We are thankful for Filipinos friends and comrades who have been not only in the past but still today offering solidarity and support for Vietnam, and we are grateful for them, and we want to wish all the success to the struggle of Filipinos, progressive people and organization to make a brighter future for your country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much again to Mr. Tran Dac Loi. Please subscribe and like this YouTube channel and share to other people.